Steve Zehngut.
Thank you. Okay, I don't think I need this. I'm good. Can everybody hear me okay? Excellent. My voice is still a little shot from last night, so bear with me. Today we're going to talk about foundation. Show of hands, who's familiar with foundation? Keep your hands up if you're already using foundation. Cool. Foundation is a responsive framework. We're going to talk about what that means in a minute, but there's other frameworks like it that you may have heard of, like Twitter Bootstrap, Bourbon and Neat, which Alex Vasquez is a fan of. I centered on Foundation about maybe 6-9 months ago, and this is how we're building websites now. So when we're building websites, we start with underscores. We're going to do that too, and then we build Foundation on top of that, and that's how we build our websites. I did tweet this morning. I posted a completed, well, sort of completed theme that I'm going to show at the end of this presentation. We're going to sort of work our way there. So if you look at the Twitter stream, I put up a GitHub link for the theme that we're going to get as far as we can building this theme during the session today. This is going to be technical, so I hope I don't scare too many people off. So let's first talk about the tools of the trade. The tools I'm going to be using today, first tool is Desktop Server. I did talk about this in the beginner's workshop yesterday. I talk about this at every single meetup. If you're not already running Desktop Server, I highly recommend that you have this. Desktop Server allows you to have a local web server on your machine. So this is my sandbox. Everything we're running, I'm just running locally. It does not require an internet connection. Desktop Server allows you to manage WordPress sites from your local machine. The other tool I use is Sublime Text. That's my HTML editor of choice, PHP editor of choice. And then I also use Chrome, the inspector. So you might be using Firefox's Firebug. I personally prefer Chrome. And I'm going to show you a trick in Chrome in a minute that part of the reason I like this tool the best for inspecting CSS. Any questions so far? Yes.
Can you compare ServerPress and Bitnami?
Can I compare ServerPress and Bitnami? Not in this session. Talk to one of the ServerPress guys. He's right here. Talk to Greg Franklin afterwards, and he'll help you with that. It's beyond the scope of this session. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do here is download a fresh copy of Underscores. That's always my first step in the process. Underscores is at underscores.me. And what Underscores is, it's just a base theme. It's a bare bones theme. There is no design to it. It is meant as a starting point. This is not a child theme. Okay, Underscores is a theme that you're going to download, and you're going to build that theme. It's not meant to be updated. There's no update cycle. You don't get WordPress updates. You download this, and that is your starter theme. That's where you're going to start from. Does that make sense? So if you thought this was a child theming session, it is not. That's not what we're building here. We are building a theme from scratch. And so when I download Underscores, that's my starting point for every theme that I build. Give my theme a name. I'm just going to call it Awesome Theme. Give it a slug. So the name is your user-friendly name. Slug is how it's going to be referenced in the back end of WordPress, in the database. I'll set myself as the author, put in my URL, and I'll give it a little description as well. Demo theme from OC WordCamp 2014. Whoops. Click Generate. And what this does is it's just downloaded a theme with those settings in it. So I now have a base theme ready to go. That's what Underscores is. Nope. So here's the theme that I just downloaded. It's this zip file. Is that a question in the back, or are you stretching? All right. If I unzip it, you can see it's just got all of my base files that you'd find in any WordPress theme. I'm not going to go through each of these files, but does this make sense to everybody so far? Good. Second thing I do is download a copy of Foundation. Foundation is at foundation.zerb.com. And this is where I spend a lot of my time when I'm working in Foundation, and we're going to go through some of the documentation here. So I just sort of keep this site up as reference as I'm building my theme. But to get Foundation, you just click Download Foundation, and now you've got a copy of the, Download Everything. Now you've got a copy of the latest Foundation. It just came down there. The latest Foundation is 5.2.3. This is an open source project, maintained similar to how WordPress is maintained. They do have their pros and cons. As new versions of Foundation come out, sometimes things break. So it is important to sort of test things as you go. And there is something I will point out that is not working for me in 5.2.3. So actually today I'm going to show Foundation 5.2.2 because I know that that's stable for the theme that I'm building. Okay? Any questions on where to get these pieces? All right. Once I have Foundation, what I do is I unzip it and I just put it in my theme folder, and I call the folder Foundation. So this is the entire Foundation framework. That's all it consists of. It's CSS. It's got some JavaScript. I'm not going to go through what each of these files means, but Foundation is now sitting in my theme folder. Okay? So the first thing I want to do here is connect Foundation to my theme, to my underscores theme. Make them sort of work together. All right? The way I do that is inside, I open up my functions.php file. Let's see if I can make this a little smaller. So these scripts I've added to the, this is how underscores looks out of the box. So what you're looking for is underscores will name this. Remember I named my theme Awesome Theme? That was the slug I gave it. So the underscores, when it generates that theme file for me, it names all your functions for you. So Awesome Theme is already named when I unzip underscores. I didn't name that manually. Okay. So the name of your theme /scripts is the function that you're looking for. Okay. This is where it's enqueuing all the scripts and style sheets inside of your theme. So we're going to add to this, and we're going to enqueue the Foundation style sheets and the JavaScript that it needs to run. Okay. There you go. Now, let me go through what these are. The first thing I'm doing is enqueuing the Foundation normalized script. The normalized CSS. So, and again, if you can't read this, you don't necessarily need to take the notes on this. I've already posted this on GitHub. So if you need this, I'll post the URL afterwards, or I've already tweeted it this morning. So essentially what this line is doing is it's enqueuing the normalized script in Foundation. The normalized CSS in Foundation. Underscores already comes with its own normalized CSS, so I'm just layering this on top of what's already there. Okay. In addition, I'm adding the Foundation CSS, which is sort of the base CSS for Foundation. So I'm enqueuing those two style sheets. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay. The next thing I'm doing is adding my own custom CSS. So this has nothing to do with Foundation, but this is where I play with CSS. Yes?
Why are you enqueuing the style sheet instead of doing an import in style.css?
Say that again? Why am I enqueuing instead of doing an import?
Doing an @import into underscores main style sheet.
I just find this cleaner. I find this easier, and I believe that, this is really this is the way WordPress wants you to do it.
Okay.
The other
Go ahead, John.
This is that most caching plugins can concatenate the enqueue with a single one.
Okay. Say it again, John.
A lot of WordPress caching plugins can find the enqueue functions and concatenate those CSS files into a single CSS.
Thank you.
Whereas it's an import that way.
Yeah. So if I've got like CSS files running my typography, should I be enqueuing those rather than importing them?
Yes.
Okay.
The next thing I'm doing is adding the Foundation JavaScript, their base JavaScript. That's what this foundation.min.js. Now that includes everything or it's at least supposed to include everything. What I found is there was a bug in 5.2.2 where it wasn't including this script called Modernizer. So that's what I'm doing here on this second line is I'm specifically including this script. I don't know if there's a fix for it, but that was my workaround in Foundation 5.2.2. Like I said, Foundation's not perfect. It is a large open source team, and there are things that break. And so this was my workaround for something that I'm going to show. Actually, what this does is it fixes the Foundation slider. There's a slider library that comes in Foundation, in specifically 5.2.2. Okay. And then the last thing I'm doing is then initializing Foundation. So I have a small script that I wrote that I call foundation.js. That's just sitting loose in my theme file. And this is all it does. It just starts the Foundation library. That's all that little script does there. So that's the last little bit that I'm doing. And that's all you need to get Foundation up and running and ready to go inside of your theme. Okay, so now Foundation is ready to use. Making sense so far? Great. So, the place I would go if you're looking to learn Foundation is to the Foundation docs. And I spend most of my time here. I sort of just keep this browser window up as I'm developing. This will give you the basics of how Foundation works. It gives you some really good samples. But the first place I want to look here is, let's go back to here. If I click on that Develop tab up top, this gives you some really good ideas of how Foundation is set up and how it works. It gives you some base templates to look at. It really is a good place to learn Foundation. But the basics of Foundation work like this. It's just rows and columns. So it's a 12 grid. It's a 12 column grid system. Okay, it's based on a 960 width. Let's look at, say, this. So this is a layout, and again, the way I learned Foundation is I just opened this up, I looked at their source code, and I saw what they were doing. Okay? Find one more document here. So inside of the docs, inside of the doc link here, there's I clicked on a link under structure called grid. This one specifically will tell you how their grid system works. So if you study this a little bit, I'm not going to go through all the details of this page, it'll show you kind of how to set up the rows and columns. So a row basically works like this. Anything that is a section of your site that needs sort of a what's called a clear both or a overflow hidden. Any of those blocks is a row, and a row will include all of the CSS necessary to sort of start and end. It's distinct. Okay? Within that row, then I have 12 columns to work with. If you look at the Zeek site, we just launched this on Friday, by the way, our new site. Each of these bands of color is a row. So now let's look at columns. And that's why I like this page, because this is 12 columns split into thirds, which is 4, 4, 4. Or you can do this kind of split, which is 3, 6, 3, 2, 8, 2. Not only are these, does it show you kind of these columns laid out here, but if I if I shrink the browser, I can start to see how those columns work together in a responsive state. So that's the real benefit of Foundation, is it's responsive out of the box. So as long as I work within this column structure, I get to dictate how the responsive state works on each of these. So let me backtrack a minute. Has anybody read a book called Mobile First Design? If you haven't, I highly recommend that you get it. It's from a book apart. And Mobile First Design will get you to start thinking about building from the inside out. And that took me a while to get that to click inside of Foundation, but that is really how Foundation is built. It's meant to be built from sort of the smallest version up. So when you're thinking about Foundation, you should be thinking about your mobile site first, and then building up from there. We talked about some tools of the trade. The reason I use Chrome is because if I wanted to see this on an iPhone size, I open up my inspector. There's a button over here that turns on the console, and inside the console there's a tab called emulation. Okay, this is kind of well hidden, but I do talk about this at the meetup. Under emulation, I've chosen iPhone 5. I click emulate, and now my browser is emulating what it looks like on an iPhone. That's all built into Chrome. Okay, so I want to do that again if anybody missed that. Inside of the inspector, okay, you open up the console, which is this button, this third to the right button over here. Underneath console, there's a tab called emulation, and that's where you can emulate different screen sizes. So I've chosen iPhone 5. I click emulate, and now I've got my iPhone size inside the browser. Okay? If I click reset, I'm back to the browser size, so I can switch back and forth very easily there. So again, this is a tool that I use pretty consistently as I'm developing. And when I'm developing a site, what I might do is just open up two windows, have one in emulation mode and one in not, so I can see things side by side. Make sense? Yes, Priscilla?
It seems like in Firebug, whenever I look at, because there's a developer's tool that lets you see the different media views. When I look at the CSS, it's still looking at my regular desktop. It's not looking at my media queries.
This is looking at my media queries. So this is actually emulating, and my media queries take effect. And actually, your media queries take effect if you're, I see a lot of people do this in their presentations. Let's drag the browser and let's see what it looks like at every single pixel dimension. I used to do that as well. I don't do this anymore. I'm developing for iPhone portrait, iPhone landscape, iPad portrait and landscape, and desktop, and that's about it. Those in-between sizes, if I see something kind of go weird, I really don't care as much anymore. So I like this emulation tool because that's what it looks like on an iPhone. Now, if you're doing this, if you are dragging the browser and I go as small as possible, right? That's as small as Chrome goes on my Mac. That's actually too big. That's not an iPhone size. So that's something. Yeah, it's still bigger than what an iPhone is. If I emulate, you can see it goes even smaller than that. So if you're just shrinking your browser as small as it will go, that's actually not true iPhone size. So I really do like this emulate tool quite a bit.
Emulate also changes the user agent, if you're doing user agent detection.
Good point. John just said that emulate actually changes the user agent, so now Chrome thinks it's acting as Safari for iPhone. Good point. Okay? All right. So what I like to do in this page specifically is look at this page in emulation mode to kind of see what these columns are doing when you're on these smaller sizes. So here's how the columns work. One of the things I really like about Foundation is it really is kind of written in plain English. It's pretty easy to learn. So there's 3 sizes in Foundation. Actually, there's more, but the 3 sizes I really work with are small, medium, and large. Okay, small is iPhone, medium is iPad, large is desktop. That's it. Okay, and the media queries are set up the same way: small, medium, large. They give you all the code you need if you want to set up specific media queries, and we'll look at a CSS file in a minute. But to set up, this row is set up as 2 columns on the left and 10 columns on the right. You can see it right here: small 2 and small 10 columns. That's how you dictate that 2, 10. Okay. If I wanted this to be 2 and 10 for small, but 6 and 6 once they go to medium, I actually just put that right before small. I put medium 6. So medium 6, small 2, and it'll do the rest of the adjustment as the browser gets bigger and smaller. Yes. The order does not matter.
Is it always a 12-column grid, or is it ever 16?
You can make different column grid. You can customize Foundation, but out of the box, it's a 12-column grid, a 960.
You just mentioned small, medium, and large. What about portrait and landscape mode? How do you deal with that?
Those are just screen widths. Portrait and landscape are just screen widths. So since we're talking about this, let's look at media queries. So inside of the docs, there is, under structure, there's a media queries tab. So this actually gives you the different sizes that it's looking at. Everything goes by M's. So small is up to 640. Medium is up to 1024, and then everything past that is large. Okay? So portrait or landscape doesn't really matter. It's the screen width that matters. Okay. So this page is important because these media queries that are here, I actually just usually copy these and put them right into the bottom of my style sheet. And that's what I use for my custom media queries if I need something specific. So I don't write by hand the sizes out for the media queries anymore. I just copy what Foundation gives me and use those. Okay. So let's write some code. So, in the theme that I posted on GitHub, I very specifically commented what I changed from underscores. And if you look at this, I actually changed very little. Most of the things in underscores I just sort of left alone. What I did is added just the Foundation lines. Okay? So underscores really gave me all of this. Okay, I'm looking at single.php, so this is what a post is going to look like. Okay, so underscores wrote all of this, and what I added is I just wrapped it in a row and my columns. Okay, so my columns are, and let me look at the theme. At the large size, I'm using 9 and 3. Okay, 9 for this area, the content area, and 3 for the sidebar. Okay, so in my single.php, I've said use large 9. So on the large screen, use 9 columns for the content area, and then for the sidebar, large 3. That's all it took to set up those columns. It does all the floating. It does all the breakpoints. Everything's all set up for me in Foundation. Okay. At the medium size, I didn't think it looked right. So as I shrunk this down to an iPad size, the sidebar was getting too squished in a 9:3. So what I did was, at the medium size, I went to 8 and 4. Okay. And what that did is you can see it. So the sidebar gets a little bit larger when I go down to the medium size. See? Yeah, I know I'm breaking my own rule. Okay? Now you'll notice I didn't dictate the small size. So there's large and medium. I didn't say anything about small. Okay? That's okay. What Foundation assumes is if I don't designate a small size, it's just going to stack everything for me in one column. So you don't have to do anything with small. Once it gets past that medium breakpoint, it's just going to wrap the sidebar underneath the content. So let's look at that. So let's go into emulate. Come on. Nope. So there's my content area, and it's already wrapped the sidebar at the bottom. Okay, so because I'm at the small size, it knows just stack these things on top of each other. Now, if I wanted to be, if I wanted to be OCD about this, I could say small 12, meaning take up all 12 columns at the small size. That's what it's doing. It's just making that assumption for me that that's what I want. Making sense? Okay. So the next thing I did here was I have 2 columns within this content area, right? So the content area is breaking into 2 columns. I'm not using columns there. This is a different piece of Foundation. It's called a block grid. Okay? So the block grid, Foundation will do. So right now I've got a block grid of 2, so it'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It sets up the grid for me, and just as many posts as I throw it, it will set up the depth of that grid. Okay, that's right here. So that's in index.php. So again, all I've done here is added my row, my columns, and then I wrapped the posts area in this block grid. And I've said give me, at the large size, give me a block grid of 2, meaning 2 up. And it's just going to stack, it's going to stack and zigzag all the way down. All right, so that's how I'm getting these posts here. This is number 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. I'll show you. If I change this block grid to 3, it's going to look a little weird, but if I change it to 3 up, now I've got 3. This is why I really love Foundation. This is why it's so powerful, because I can set these things up, show a client, and if they don't like it, make one quick change while I'm sitting there, and I can affect the whole layout. Was there a question over here? Okay.
I was just trying to figure out if you could, like, once you've got it figured out, if you could then use that to create custom postings instead of just single posts.
Well, I'm actually controlling whatever content I want in here. So all I'm doing is, for this presentation, all I did was just layered Foundation on top of underscores. I could put a custom post type in here, no problem. I can make this query anything I want. So for the block grid, block grid works off of a unordered list. So I've got my UL dictating block grid, and then I've got each of my posts wrapped in an LI. That's how block grid works. Yes? Sure, you'd have a row for your feature post, and then start your block grid underneath it. And you can nest these things as deep as you want. So, and that's actually an important point. So the question was, what if we had a featured post that we wanted to go above these first 2 posts, maybe up here? What I would do is, in this area, I'd put another row. Okay, so rows by default they're 960. That's a max. Excuse me, they're at 1,000. That's a max width with a margin. If I nest it in there, it's going to go to 100%. So the row would be sitting within this area, right? I'd put in my feature post, and then I'd start my block grid right underneath that. That makes sense to everybody? Okay. I don't know if you noticed, but the sidebar I've colored as gray. It goes all the way down to the bottom of the page, right? If I have 2 things, typically if I have 2 things side by side, the sidebar is only going to go to the bottom of the content. And by default, that's what it does. So there it is. That's kind of how it looks if you just throw in a sidebar. What Foundation has in it is, and if you saw that, I have a reference called Data Equalizer. Okay, Data Equalizer. Again, it's back here in the docs. By the way, I was just looking at the block grid section here, so if you need more information on that, it's right there. They have lots of samples of block grids. Down toward the bottom is the Data Equalizer. Right. There it is, Equalizer. So Equalizer is a JavaScript library, and it's just meant to make all of something the same height. Okay, so what I've done here is I've said, in this row, I want this row to use the Data Equalizer, and I want the content, I'm sorry, you do Data Equalizer for the first reference, and then Data Equalizer watch for the things that you want to be the same height. So I've attached Data Equalizer watch to the content area and to the sidebar. And that's what's making them the same height. Okay, it's all built into Foundation. There it is. Here's the last thing I was going to show, is the nav. Now this can be a little tricky, and I actually think this is the trickiest area of working with Foundation. The nav can be complicated. The 2 navs that I use are top bar. So if you look under navigation, they've got off-canvas top bar. So top bar has pretty extensive functionality. Lots of things you can do with the nav, lots of different types of things you can put in their nav bar. Where it becomes tricky is when you try to style their nav bar. So right in this theme, I'm just using the default Foundation style. So just keep that in mind, that customizing it can get a little wacko. That's a technical term. So this top bar here, okay, this top bar, again, I'm just using the Foundation built-in look, but it's got pull downs, and it also does this. I know I'm breaking my own rule again. But watch, when I get to that middle breakpoint, it disappears, and I've now got a little off-canvas bar here for mobile version. Okay? So there's two things I'm integrating there. But did everybody see that? Okay? So the first bar is here. So what I did is I commented out the default nav bar that comes with underscores. I left it there so you can see what I did. So I took that out and I put in my own foundation version of the nav bar here. So I am using WP nav menu, but I've wrapped it in the necessary foundation tags that it needs to render that nav bar. Okay. Again, it can be a little bit tricky. The other thing that I have inside of functions.php, I've added a little bit of code so that it is more foundation friendly. So WordPress has different references than foundation. And I know I probably could have done this with a more extensive walker type of script, but I made it just kind of easy so people could understand. What I'm doing here is just sort of adding the foundation references for has dropdown and dropdown. So it knows that those menus are dropdown menus. So that's what these two things are doing. They're working together. The off-canvas menu is also sitting inside of header. It's right at the top. So the off-canvas menu is actually a wrapper that goes around your entire site. It's the first thing that appears within the body tag and the last thing that happens in the footer tag, in the footer PHP. So that's the end of off-canvas menu in the footer, and that's the beginning of off-canvas menu in the header. Okay, so the whole thing wraps your site, and that's how this works. There. So how do I make them sort of work together? You notice that the top nav goes away when I get to that middle breakpoint, and the off-canvas menu appears at the top, right? Again, pretty simple language here inside of Foundation for this. So the off-canvas menu, the reference I've given it is hide for large only, okay, which means show on medium and small. And that reference can be found here under Foundation Visibility. So visibility will give you all these references, things like show for small only, show for medium up. Kind of any sort of conditional you can think of is already built into Foundation. So the reference I'm using here is hide for large only, meaning when I'm on the desktop version, that off-canvas menu doesn't even appear. It's completely hidden. Just the opposite on the nav, I have show for large only. Okay, so on the nav, it's only showing on the large version, hiding for medium and small. And that's how the two are sort of working together. So once it hits that medium breakpoint, top menu goes away, off-canvas menu appears. Make sense? I'll give you a couple other samples. I don't have time to go into the technical details, but Foundation has a really nice library for using video. So it makes video responsive. So this video is actually wrapped in a Foundation tag called Flex Video. So it is responsive. And Flex Video has two tags for standard resolution and widescreen. And you tell it what you want. So that's all under, again, if you just look under the docs, under Flex Video. So right there, the reference you give it is widescreen if you're using 16:9. Okay. In addition, I don't know if you've noticed this, you can tell it which video service you're using. So in this site, I've said I'm using YouTube. So Foundation knows the sizing and does some adjustments specifically for the YouTube embed. If you're using Vimeo, you tell it you're using Vimeo. So you just tell Foundation what you're doing, and it'll do the rest for you. The other thing I want to mention is the orbit slider. I don't particularly care for sliders. I know you love that comment. But if you like sliders and if you need sliders, you don't have to install a different slider library. It's already built in Foundation. It's called Orbit Slider. So Orbit Slider does require a little bit of JavaScript. I mean, it's already built in the Foundation library, but it's there. This, like the top nav, can be a little bit tricky to work with, a little bit tricky to customize, but it is a nice slider, and it does work pretty well. That's called Orbit Slider. There's a lot more to Foundation. I've only scratched the surface, but you can see, just looking down the side of the docs here, pretty much anything you can think of, there's sort of an easy way to implement it in Foundation. So once you get up and running with this library, you're going to see that it's a major time saver, and I can attest to that. As soon as I really wrapped my head around this library, I've saved a ton of time. So that theme that I posted this morning for this talk, I wrote in an hour. So feel free to download it, learn from it, and if you have any comments on it, let me know, and I can make changes. There's a question in the back.
So it looks like Foundation is a theme on its own as well as you're dropping in.
No, Foundation is a CSS library and has some JavaScript. It's not a theme. Yep, there is a Foundation theme. There is a theme called Foundation. That's not this. What you want is the Foundation framework, which is at foundation.zerb.com. Are we in Q&A? Are we? Okay, cool. Thank you. We'll take questions now. Yeah, there's a. Thank you.
When you're customizing, how much of the styles are you overwriting? Or are you like replacing?
I'm not replacing any Foundation styles because that's not really where my custom CSS. So the question was, how many styles am I overriding? How many styles am I customizing? Foundation styles, I just let them sort of do what they want to do. I'm not really overriding those at all, except with the exception of maybe some fonts and some font sizing, because Foundation does do some font sizing for you. Other than that, I'm letting Foundation do its thing, and then I'm writing my styles on top of that. So everything that you see here or here, that was styles that are sort of sitting outside of Foundation. So it really is building on top of it. Does that help answer your question? So I'm not doing a lot of overriding of Foundation itself. Was there another question over here? Yes.
Oh, yeah, I'm using Foundation 4 on a rather large website, and I want to update to Foundation 5, but I've been scared to do it.
I would be too.
Any advice how I should go about it?
So the question was upgrading from 4 to 5. Desktop server. Definitely make sure you have a sandbox. Don't do this on a live site.
Okay.
Best thing you can do is install Foundation 5 sort of not side by side, but instead name your Foundation 4 library as a backup and see what it does. There were a lot of changes from Foundation 4 to Foundation 5, so it is going to break. I can tell you that. So
Awesome.
Yeah. I don't have the URL, but there actually is a doc about upgrading from 4 to 5. There are some specifics there. Yes. Questions? Was there another? Yep.
How does Foundation compare to Bootstrap?
I don't use Bootstrap. So the question was, how does Foundation compare to Bootstrap? I don't use Bootstrap, but if you run into Devin Walker, I don't know if he's here today. Devin Walker is a Bootstrap guy, so you might want to ask him his opinion on that. Yep.
GitHub URL?
Oh, thank you. So the URL is github.com/Steve Zehngut. Oh, that's the wrong one. /OCWC 2014-Foundation. I tweeted it this morning. If you need it, I'll just leave this up on the screen. More questions? If you think of anything afterwards, feel free to grab me, and if you come to the meetup, especially Developer Day, we can talk about it there too. So, I think. Thank you.